Famer Eric Dickerson.
What's up, everybody? I'm Matt Leinart, 2004 Heisman Trophy winner.
Hey, I'm Zane Gonzalez.
Hi, I'm Matt Barry from ESPN. You're getting ready to watch one of the best college football podcasts ever. It's the Harris Highlight Show.
You're watching the Harris Highlight Show.
And you're watching the Harris Highlight Show.
And you're listening to the Harris Highlight Show. Enjoy it.
Na 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 na.
Coming to you live from the Chateau in beautiful Monrovia, California, this is the Harris Highlight Show. Joining me this week is our college football analyst, Josh Schaefer, our college football expert, Lyle Goldstein. Our executive producer, Brady Klain, is taking his paid vacation for the first time in our 5-year show existence. So he's finally taking use of that paid vacation. So got to give props to him on that. So without our executive producer today, but that's okay because if we need it, Josh is currently at the Chateau to assist with anything that's needed. So luckily for Josh, he was very generous in his time and actually came here to the Chateau. So you know what? I'm going to provide assistance if needed. So major shout out to Josh. The invite was extended to Lyle. We said, Lyle, you're more than welcome to come hang out at the Chateau. But unfortunately, Lyle declined the request.
We're having dinner too. You could have been here, Lyle.
We have pasta night going on at the Chateau, a Dodgers game, and Lyle passed on the viewing party. So
you could have been here, Lyle.
Yeah, he could have been.
Going back to my square.
It would have been a trek and a half, but yeah, maybe a mistake.
Lyle would have had to travel across a couple states, and which is a valid excuse for not attending. But gentlemen, how are we doing on this fine Thursday evening? A different different time and date than normal.
My work commute is long. It is frustrating, but I'm here, and Blake is letting me stay at his place tonight. You could have been here, Lyle. You could have been here. But instead, I'm going to be crashing on Blake's couch alone, lonely, probably cold. You could have been here, Lyle.
What's the over-under for the Dodgers tonight?
Oh, man. Who do we play tonight? The Mets?
So it's probably 8. It's probably 8 because the Dodgers are going to score 7 runs and the Mets might get 1. So, hey, stranger things have happened. We'll have to wait and see. So we have a very exciting show. Our last episode, we broke down the Big 12. We talked about everything going on with Oklahoma and Texas. We were going to do the SEC, but without BK this week, we thought it'd be smarter just to talk about the ACC. No offense, but the ACC just isn't as exciting as the SEC, so we want to make sure we have all 4 guys here for that. So tonight we're going to be talking about the ACC. But guys, before we get to the ACC, as we always like to do in our shows, if you guys have been watching our shows over the last few years, you know that we've come to hate the AP Top 25 poll. I believe that's the poll where I called out a person for having Clemson ranked number 1, and Clemson went on to win the national championship. So some fond memories of the AP Top 25 poll, but nonetheless, with the first AP poll coming out, that means college football is near. We are, I think, officially a week and a half away from week 0, which is what they're calling it nowadays. I think UCLA plays like Hawaii, and there's a few just random games sprinkled in. But the real college football season begins in 2 weeks, but then again, it's still fastly approaching. So, guys, I did get up some of the rankings. We're going to break it down from, the top 10, 11 through 20, then the top final 5. Pretty much just showing our initial thoughts. Again, it's week 1 of the college football season. These rankings are likely going to look entirely different when they matter in November, but it's still fun to see where voters have teams to start the season. So again, we're going to start here with teams 1 through 10. Lyle, I will throw it to you first. Looking at this 1 through 10, were there any teams that stood out to you? Was there anything that caught your eye? Teams that you thought were ranked too high or too low in this initial first top 25?
Well, I guess if I'll get nitpicky, Oklahoma at 2 ahead of Clemson and Ohio State seemed a little bit high just because, like we've talked about, it feels like there's a gap between the 3 teams of Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and everybody else. To be fair, Oklahoma has a lot coming back with Rattler and with Benito on the other side of the ball and Kennedy Brooks coming back. But it's just hard for me after seeing empirical data to really put them over Clemson and Ohio State at this point. So I guess I was a little surprised to see Oklahoma at 2. Other than that, I'd say it's all about right. I don't really know what to think of Notre Dame this season. Like, to me, after everything they lost, this feels like the type of year where they may be 8-4, give or take a couple games. But I know they always start the year high. So I guess I wasn't surprised by anything. If one thing stood out to me, I guess it was Oklahoma over Clemson and Ohio State.
So Jack Cohn doesn't get you feeling excited this season?
That just doesn't feel like the quarterback of the 9th best team in college football is all. I hope I'm wrong, but it just doesn't.
I'll play devil's advocate here. I actually like Oklahoma at 2. And here's why. I think that as a team, maybe even program-wise, I think Clemson and Ohio State, like Lyle said, are in that big 3 right now with Alabama. And right now there is a little bit of a gap between those 3 and then Oklahoma and Georgia and then everybody else in college football. And that includes Notre Dame. Like Lyle has said it best, and we've reiterated a couple times, Notre Dame was that scapegoat last year. They were the scapegoat a couple years ago as just being that one team that doesn't meet those other 3, right? I like Oklahoma at 2, and the reason why is because they've got a lot of people coming back. And I think just for a simple example here, Clemson and Ohio State are 2 of those teams that, are still in a really good spot, are going to be a really good team this year, but have one glaring question mark for me, and it's that their superstar starting quarterback is not coming back. Yes, Clemson's got DJ Uiagalelei. Yes, Ohio State's depth at quarterback seems really good, and there's all the hype around the recruits too. I'm like all here for that. That's just the one thing I'll give Oklahoma over is I think there is a lot of hype around Spencer Rattler. Who am I to say he's going to be boom or bust? But I think that seems to be a lot of people saying that he's got the highest ceiling in the world, but who knows if he's going to pan out. Last year I said he's really talented, but he plays like a freshman. So I think this is going to be a really big year for Spencer Rattler. And side note, I don't know why we keep talking about number 2, because on my AP poll, it's probably a glitch on my computer. It goes 4-3-4-1. So Oklahoma for me is a second number 4 on my computer. It's got to be some sort of glitch, but it's on the AP News website that they're ranked at 4, and so is Ohio State.
I was going to add that because it is also like that on mine. It goes Alabama 1, Oklahoma 4, Clemson 3, Ohio State 4. So yeah, there must be some glitch or the voters who come to their senses. This one, I was shocked to see Oklahoma at number 2, but looking at this, it's really almost identical. Both Oklahoma and Clemson each received 6 first-place votes. Oklahoma in total received 1,462 points, whereas Clemson received 1,447. So, I mean, this was the difference. I didn't go look and see what every voter did, but this is probably the difference of one voter out there being a smart aleck and having one of these teams ranked like number 10 or 11, and that's what sunk them. So, again, no big deal. It is interesting, though, to see Oklahoma this high. The ones that stood out to me was just seeing Notre Dame at 9, like Lyle kind of mentioned as well, although they were in the playoff last year. This team is not as good as last year, at least coming into the year, you'd assume so. So having to crack that top 10, especially at 9, seems a bit high. And it was cool seeing Iowa State at 7. That's the highest they've ever just even been ranked in any AP poll in college football history. And Cincinnati, they come in ranked number 8. I was worried that as they do every year, voters just discount what group of 5 teams do. So I was thinking Cincinnati, they might be ranked like 15, 16 or so, just because it's a new year. They're going to have to prove people again, but they come in at number 8. So it was exciting to see them there. And North Carolina, I believe from what I looked up, this is the first time they've been in the top 10, or this is the highest they've been since Mac Brown's first year at North Carolina, the first time around. So, yeah, overall, for the most part, no problem with the top 10. I think these are the teams that we can expect. I'll throw it to you guys, though. I believe since 2001, I want to say, or 2002, only 2 teams have won the national championship when they started the season as the preseason number 1 overall team. Can you guys guess who those 2 teams were that stayed at number 1? Well, didn't stay at number 1, but they were number 1 to begin the year and ended the season as national champions.
So since what year?
I believe it's like 2002 or 2003, one of those years. I don't have the exact one, but early 2000s.
Sorry, I also realized that I just coughed and muted myself, but you can still hear me in Blake's mic because I've got headphones on and he's got an actual mic. I am going to say, who won last year? Bama. I'm going to say, man, was Bama number 1 last year? I already don't remember, but for the sake of me getting it wrong and potentially Lyle getting it wrong as well, I'm going to say 2020 Alabama, and I'm going to say 2004 USC. Lock it in as my final answers.
I was going to say 04 USC, and then I was going to say, I mean, I feel like a default guess has to be one of these Alabama teams that won. I don't think it was last year, just because when Notre Dame beat Clemson last year, I believe Clemson was number 1 at the time. I think Alabama was 2 and then jumped them after the loss. But I'll say 2017 Alabama.
And yet again, I think Lyle somehow stole my notes because Lyle got both of them correct. So 04 USC, 2017 Alabama. They started the season ranked number 1, and they won the national championship. So again, I don't have the exact year, either 02, 03, something like that. But essentially only 2 times over the last 20 years, the preseason number 1 team didn't win the national championship. Josh, remember how it went in 2013 when SC started the season ranked number 1? Or 2012?
Yeah, in 2012, USC was like number 1. And man, like they had all the injuries too, and then they just like weren't that good. And like that's what sucks is everyone's like, oh, Matt Barkley was a bust. But like if you go and look at his stats, like Matt Barkley was really good that year too. Because that was Marquise Lee won the Bolitnikoff, and the team was 7-5.
Yeah,
After like they had so many injuries and dudes were getting hurt, and then like against UCLA. The USC was moving down the field for like the game-winning touchdown, and Barkley got drilled and dislocated his shoulder, and his college career was like over. And then they had like their third-string quarterback, Max Whittick or whatever, was the starter against Notre Dame a week later and lost against number 1 Notre Dame. But man, 2012 was a forgettable year.
That it was. All right, guys, we're going to move on now to the next tier, 11 through 20. So again, here are the latest rankings. So again, Lyle, I'll throw it to you. Takeaways, a team we thought was too high, ranked too low, something that stood out from looking at 11 through 20 here in the AP poll.
Most of it seems about right. The one I'm looking at is LSU at 16, only because they weren't all that great last year. And I know they've got 2 stud corners on the outside, but other than that, they got a ton of questions on the offensive side of the ball at this point. They lost additional pieces with Terrace Marshall going to the draft and Eric Gilbert transferred. So I don't know. I mean, and there's questions at their quarterback play too. So that seemed a little high for LSU just because I don't really know what to think of them outside of their 2 corners.
Yeah, I totally agree with Lyle. That's the one that jumps out to me. I think Indiana, Iowa, Penn State, Washington, I think those are all teams that are like placed perfectly in there. I would love to, I mean, I know like some sites have ASU in this mix right here. I think ASU belongs in this mix too. I just think half the major outlets out there are completely ignoring them for whatever reason. Like I don't even think they were ranked in a couple of the polls. They were 25th in the AP. I think Athlon Sports has them at 15. So I would love to see ASU in this mix. I think they belong in this mix. I think Oregon, Wisconsin, Florida, Miami, USC, I think those are a couple teams that you can flip-flop around all in the same window. To be honest with you, like every year Oregon is ranked high. Every year I have my doubts. Last year, they weren't very good last year. They won the Pac-12 and shouldn't have been in the Pac-12 championship game. Like I don't think Oregon was very good at all last year. So I don't know. I think Oregon is like ranked really high every single year, and every year I say the same thing, and it's, you know, like, let me see it then. And I know that a couple years ago, like Blake had them going undefeated, and like we all, the 3 of us on the show was like, no, like they're already overrated. And then they didn't have a great year, and they lost it to ASU and lost like 2 of their last 3 or something like that. So like, whatever, like Oregon's going to be good, but I'll believe it when I see it. But on that same note, like when it comes to Iowa State in the top 10, and I know that a lot of people were saying like they're too high. They didn't really lose anybody. They're bringing back all their key players, and they beat Oregon last year in a big game. They like proved that they can beat a big team like that. So I just want to go back to the Iowa State thing real quick. I think Iowa State, good for them. This is a big year for them. Let's see if they've got it, But so far they've proven it. But, I like this 11 through 20 for the most part. Like, I would swap maybe one or two teams. But again, like, I think this is the best part of the AP right here.
If this Oregon team had Justin Herbert, they would be, I think, a near lock to reach the college football playoff. It's just, this team is so good. I mean, I think Kayvon Thibodeau is the best defensive player in the entire country. Offensively, I think they have some really nice weapons. It's just what Anthony Brown is, who's likely going to be their starting quarterback. I just don't think he can lead Oregon to the promised land. So talent-wise, I like Oregon. It's just I'm really interested to see what they do, at the quarterback play. A lot of these teams, I mean, you could kind of like nitpick each one and just, dissect. Like Wisconsin, we saw a small sample from them last season. Wasn't really encouraging. They're ranked fairly high to start the season. Florida, they lose a lot of good pieces. I think having them at 14 or 13, that seems a bit of a stretch. We don't really have much of a sample size from Emory Jones as a consistent starter, so not exactly sure there. Miami, I think Derek King's going to be back by week 1, but they're going to get dismantled by Alabama. Again, they're kind of a question mark. I like what Lyle said earlier about LSU. I know that they won the national championship 2 years ago, and I think a lot of people are still kind of trying to build them off that, but I think that was just a perfect team at the right time. I don't think last year was a fluke. You don't go 5-5 for being a fluke. You go 5-5 because you're an okay team. I think they're going to be better this year, but I don't think they're going to be contending for the SEC at all. USC, I mean, you can make the case they should be, kind of closer to Oregon because they have a lot of talent coming back. But again, it's kind of like we'll talk about, I'm sure, with Texas in a few minutes. Is this the year that USC is back and gets over the hump? So I got no problem being there. Indy, I'm sad we can't get Brady here to get his thoughts on Indiana. I think this is the first time the Hoosiers have been ranked to start the season since like the late 60s. I think the year they played USC in the Rose Bowl, if I'm not mistaken, unless that was in like the 50s or something like that. And then you got, Iowa, Penn State, Washington, they rounded out. Penn State, I know people like talk down on them, but they were literally one of the hottest teams in the country last year to close out the season after going like 0-5. I think they like went 5-0 to close the season. Washington's an interesting team, though, especially in the Pac-12. They have an interesting quarterback situation where they have 3 guys that can easily see starts. And they also, I think, I forget his name. Was he the top overall recruit coming out this past year, the Washington got? I know he was a 5-star.
What, Sam Heward?
Yeah.
He was the number 1 quarterback. I don't think he was the number 1 player.
I meant number 1 quarterback. Yeah, not number 1
well, yeah. Before what Quinn Ewers reclassified, I think he was the number 1. Yeah, he was the number 1 quarterback. It's Brock Heward's nephew, and Brock Heward's brother played at UW too. So they're like their whole pipeline has gone to UW. Yeah, he's supposed to be really good. He's a lefty. He threw for like a bajillion touchdowns in high school, I know. So I would assume he'll win the job there, but I guess we'll have to wait and see just because, I don't know, Dylan Morris didn't really impress me all that much last year. So
yeah, because they have Dylan Morris, they have Heward, and then I think they got like the Colorado State quarterback transferred in. So interesting quarterback battle. We know Washington's defense is going to be good as they are every year. So an interesting team to follow in the Pac-12. So those are those. We'll go through the final 5 now, guys. There's some interesting teams in here to say the least. So we got Texas at 21, Sun Belt's finest, Coastal Carolina and Louisiana coming in at 23 and 24. Not only is this the first time the Sun Belt has had 2 teams to start the AP top 25, it's the first time they've ever had a team in the top 25 to start the season. So Sun Belt history right there. And then, of course, we wrap things up with Utah and Arizona State. Guys, the SEC was tied with the Pac-12 with most teams in the top 25. Not the Big Ten, not the ACC, but the Pac-12. Now, granted, the SEC, I believe there's 6 teams were all in the top 14 or 15. So a little unbalanced, but look at the Pac-12 representing in this AP poll. I guess we need to enjoy it while we can because I'm sure we won't see 6 teams in a consistent. Hey, who knows? Maybe we will. Well, the Pac-12 is back, boys. The Pac-12 is officially back.
I mean, I like Arizona State this year. I think the Pac-12 South runs through either USC or Arizona State, and I think whoever wins the Pac-12 South is going to be a team that could potentially play in the Rose. I mean, obviously potentially play in the Rose Bowl, but I think it's a legitimate national contender this year, whoever wins Pac-12 South. And I really mean that. And obviously that's a game in November that I've got circled on my schedule. So we'll see what we get there. But again, like ASU played in 4 games last year. Like they had some COVID stuff going on in the program, so they didn't play a whole lot. They had 2 running backs average 10 yards a carry. They averaged 250 rushing yards a game. That's not even mentioning Jaden Daniels as the starting quarterback. They've got a revamped, super deep wide receiving core that can compete with Oregon's and USC's. And then also, listen to this, 25% of drives last year resulted in turnovers for the defense. Like, this is the first time in years that ASU is going to come out with a legitimate defense. So I like ASU. I like Utah. Utah's another team that, I'm kind of hoping to see a lot from this year, but we'll see. They're kind of down in the last, 2 years. And then obviously Louisiana and Coastal were both solid last year. And you know what I like about this AP poll? We roast the AP poll all the time. And we did it, every year we've done this show, which is now 5 years? We've done the show for 5 years. We've roasted the AP poll every year. Blake has literally called out AP voters by name on this show. But you know what I like about this year's AP poll? It included all of the teams that deserved recognition from last year. Iowa State's in there after a good year. Iowa had a bounce back performance in the second half of last year and quietly was really good. Iowa's in there. Cincinnati, Coastal, Louisiana, like all these teams that had really good years last year that we were saying deserve more recognition in the college football playoff rankings that hasn't been ranked in the AP polls before, but they're actually getting recognized in the first AP poll this year. Again, this AP poll could be garbage in 2 weeks into the season, But I actually like that these schools that earned recognition last year, that had good years, and ultimately didn't lose a lot, so are still coming back pretty loaded, are being recognized in the AP poll. And I think that's really good to see, at least for week 1.
Yeah, I think it's fair to give all the teams that had a good year last year some recognition. At least start them in the top 25, and if they don't play well, you drop them out. It's pretty simple. I want to be excited about ASU too, and there's a lot of reasons to be, but the Jermaine Lole injury news was tough. I mean, that's basically their best defensive player, and that injury does not sound like it's a short-term, week-to-week thing either. So I don't know how much that's going to hamper their defense. Hopefully they have some pieces that can step up and somewhat fill the void and replace them. But yeah, I think we know with ASU, it's going to go through their offense. It's going to go through Jaden Daniels, and it's going to go through their 2 running backs. So it'll be all about how much of the load they can carry. Hopefully, I mean, this will be the best year we've seen in a long time because they've got the pieces to do it. It's just, can they execute?
Yeah, I agree. So looking forward to this, guys. Before we move on in regards to the top 25, also, Josh, you might want to mute yourself there because we're getting a nice little echo on my end, but that's okay. Here are teams that just missed the list that also receive votes of any kind. Now, I do have good news to share, guys. That voter, or the 2 voters that every year somehow put in North Dakota State in the AP Top 25, even though they are an FCS team, they didn't receive any votes this year. So no FCS programs in the FBS Top 25, but some of the ones that just missed the top, this goes from the amount of votes they got. Oklahoma State, Ole Miss, those were the 2 that were actually fairly close. They received, I believe, over 100 points. Arizona State finished with 125 points. Oklahoma State 107, Ole Miss 106, then TCU with 40. So Oklahoma State, Ole Miss, those were the 2 that just missed it. Looking at these schools, guys, again, there's going to be so much that changes during the college football season. Do you see any of these teams not necessarily making a run at the college football playoff, although anything's possible, you never know? Do you think any of these teams could potentially be one of those schools that maybe sneaks their way into the top 15, maybe even sneaks their way into the top 10 at any point this season?
I think there are a couple teams here that will get derailed come conference play. So maybe a couple big non-conference wins and look really impressive, and then we'll see what happens. I think Oklahoma State is not one of those teams. I think Oklahoma State is what's saved by conference play. If you watched our last show, we did our Big 12 preview, and I said Oklahoma State is, for me, likely the number 4 team in the conference. They are nowhere near Oklahoma. Maybe they'll compete with Iowa State. And yeah, they'll compete with Texas for being that number 3 team in the conference. They'll beat all the teams they should beat. They'll lose to all the teams they should lose to. So with that being said, I think Oklahoma State wins a couple of non-conference games. They win the conference games they should win. Maybe they upset someone. Suddenly you're 8-4, 9-3. I think Oklahoma State might not be a great football team, but I think they're going to win some games, and I think they're going to be in the top 25. So that's a team that, rightfully so is, if you're counting the AP, votes as extra rankings, then I would have Oklahoma State at 26. I think Ole Miss is a team that's going to score 100 points, give up 100 points, and maybe impress some people in the first few games of the year, and then kind of get derailed in conference play. Boise State's competitive. I think North Carolina State can compete in the ACC this year, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Auburn's always fairly relevant. So, we'll see what we get from those teams. But, I like Oklahoma State to win some games. I don't think they're going to be super impressive, but I think they'll win the games that they're supposed to win, and they'll be in the top 25.
Yeah, I don't know if any of these teams will jump into the top 10, but if any of these teams that just missed have a chance to make some noise and maybe get inside the top 20, I'd probably pick Northwestern. I mean, this is a team that was in the Big Ten title game last year, and if their defense carries them like it has in years past, they can make some noise, and they could sneak into the top 20 or so. I don't think they're going to, get to the playoff or anything, but I definitely think they can be ranked.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, these teams at the top, it's determined based on how they, fare, especially in conference play. A lot of people are high on Ole Miss this season, which I get because Matt Corral looked really good last year. Ole Miss, we know what their offense does. The only problem is they allow 50 points a game. But there are people that are saying Ole Miss, they can make a quiet run, in the SEC this season. If we're talking one that I think might be kind of like an under the radar one, I think Liberty. I mean, we saw them last season. They were ranked. I believe they only lost one game, which I think they lost like on a game-winning field goal to NC State or something like that. They had like the kick blocked, or they just straight up missed it. They could have gone undefeated. Liberty has a really, really easy schedule this season. They actually play Ole Miss in November, which is going to be an insane game if you like a lot of scoring, because it's going to be Matt Corral versus Malik Willis. Liberty has an easy schedule. They can easily run the table, go undefeated. I don't think they'll get into the top 10, but they could be a team that's, ranked 16, 15. They're like 9-0, 10-0, something like that. So definitely Liberty, keep an eye on. I like what Lyle mentioned, Northwestern. They were fantastic last season. They started the season like 5-0, 6-0, something like that. I want to say they were in the Big Ten title game, put up a fight, against Ohio State. So definitely a team to keep an eye on. And then looking at the rest of some of these teams, I'm interested to see how BYU looks without Zach Wilson this year. I know they lost some pieces, in other places as well, but this was a good BYU team that we saw last year. Ball State, they came out of nowhere last year and won the MAC. So can they build off that, have another good season? And another team I just want to keep a slight eye on, and that's Nevada, especially in the Mountain West. Carson, there are people that think Carson Strong has a chance to be a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. He's a really underrated quarterback. I don't have his stats up in front of me, but I want to say his like touchdown to interception rate last year was like 30-3 or something like that. So when you have a really good quarterback, Nevada's going to be playing some pretty beatable teams. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Wolfpack climb their way into the top 25. But in regards to like top 10, I don't think any of these teams are potentially going to be making a top 10 push. If anything, like I said, Liberty, they might get to number 15. Oklahoma State, again, they might win some games that boost them into like the top 20. But I think for the most part, what you see is what you get. Michigan, we know what to expect from them this season. Josh, look at that. UCLA received the exact same amount of votes as UAB did.
Congratulations.
All right. Josh has nothing nice to say about UCLA. So
I'm trying to go. So USC's first game is September 4th or something like that. I don't know. It's the same day that UCLA plays LSU at the Rose Bowl. USC plays at 2. UCLA is at 5:30 or something like that. My plan, go to USC, tailgate all morning, go to the game. They're playing San Jose State. Slovis is going to throw for 4 and 4 by halftime, right? So dip at halftime, hop on the 4 or hop on the 5, take the 10 out to the 5, try to hop up toward the 110, zigzag your way through LA on the 110, the only freeway that is always moving, and then get to the Rose Bowl, watch LSU play UCLA. If the tickets weren't $150, I'd have tickets already. But you boys got to make some money before you can before I would willingly spend money on UCLA tickets. So if anybody has a hookup, you let me know.
That's a good plan there for sure. So, all right, guys, that wraps up our discussion on the AP Top 25. We always enjoy going over the AP Top 25 because it's always perfect. We always love it. Some really good stuff. But it's time now to get into some ACC discussion. And when talking about the ACC, you got to start with Clemson. They've been arguably one of the best teams in college football over the last 5-6 years or so. They're right up there with Alabama. Now it's going to be a different looking Clemson team. No Trevor Lawrence. The year before, before Trevor Lawrence, they had Deshaun Watson. So some pretty good quarterbacks. Now DJ Uiagalelei is up next in line. He could end up being better than both those guys at his, Clemson when his tenure's over. But still some question marks with this Clemson team. I don't think they're necessarily maybe as good as they've been in years past. We'll have to wait and see. They very well could go undefeated and win the national title. But where would you guys rank this year's Clemson team just based on, what the depth chart looking like, the talent that they returned, the incoming, 5 stars, 4 stars that they got all across the team? Do you think this Clemson team is potentially in contention for one of the best we've seen over the course of the last, 5-6 years where they've been just dominant?
I'll say as of right now, I think I like some of the teams from years past, and I think we just know a little bit more about those teams. I do think bringing back James Skalski, for example, that's a big guy to bring back. This is the leader on defense, and I think that that's a guy that you want to come back, regardless of what side of the ball he's on, when you're losing guys like Trevor Lawrence, like Amari Rodgers, like Travis Etienne. So I think that's a huge guy to bring back. But then at the same time, you're losing Amari Rodgers. You get Justin Ross back. So and the wide receiving core seems pretty deep. DJ Uiagalelei, like I said earlier, I think losing Trevor Lawrence is huge. I mean, he's one of the top NFL prospects we've seen in a long time. Lyle likes to bring this up on the show. This was a guy that was the number 1 pick 3 years out, we knew that was going to happen. And so doesn't matter how good DJ is, that's a huge loss. And yeah, DJ was really good last year. I rejected the narrative that Notre Dame beat Clemson with their backup quarterback because the dude threw for 395 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game and played in overtime and was good. So whatever. But yeah, I think this team has the potential to be better in years past. But going into the year, man, that team from 2 years ago was really good. Or from 3 years ago was really good. I just realized it's been 3 years since they've won, right? 3 years since Clemson's won a title. Yeah. That's crazy.
Trevor only won 1. Yeah.
Trevor only won 1, and it was freshman year. Mm-hmm. Man, that's crazy. But yeah, these last few teams have been really good. So we'll see. I think this team probably has better depth, I think, across the board. So I think that's pretty crazy considering how good they've been. But we'll see. I think only time's going to tell how good this team really is. But I think that they might have better depth across the board.
Where I'd rank them, 1 or 2. I mean, for me, first off, I think they're going to be pretty set on defense. Josh mentioned they bring back James Skalski. They also bring back Nolan Turner, Braylon Spector. And then I feel like Brian Brzee didn't get talked about a lot last season for whatever reason. And maybe it's because that Clemson team was so loaded. That was the number 1 prospect in the country when he came out of high school. He had 6.5 tackles for loss as a D tackle. I mean, he's really good. And he was only a freshman last year. I'd have to assume that with a normal offseason now and a year under his belt, he's basically going to take over that defense. Most of their questions, I would say, are on the offensive side of the ball. But for me, I don't think DJ's going to have any issues transitioning into the full-time starting quarterback. I think we saw enough from him last year to know that he's going to be pretty good. For me, it's all about Justin Ross. I mean, if he is actually healthy and he's actually back and fully ready to go, I mean, that could very well be the best wide receiver in college football this upcoming year because he was ascending to that when he was healthy. Him and T. Higgins were as unstoppable as any duo we'd seen in a long time. And if he's out there with guys like Nada and Ladson who have talent and they haven't broken out yet, they can really skyrocket themselves all the way to, maybe a ceiling that was higher than last year's team. Because last year's team, as good as Trevor Lawrence was and Etienne was and Amari Rodgers was, they did lose in the semifinals. I mean, it's wide open this year. We assume Clemson's going to be really good. I think if everything clicks, and especially if Justin Ross is healthy, they can get back to the national championship and potentially win it.
I'm going to jump in here real quick, Blake. I think their top returner is senior kicker BT Potter. and for two reasons. Number one, that name just screams kicker. It just screams kicker.
It does.
And then to add on to that, I think it also screams South Carolina. He's also from Rock Hill, South Carolina. So there you go. BT Potter. And also, any guesses on what BT is for? What is it short for? Anybody?
Brigham Troy.
Brigham Troy? No.
Ben Tyler Potter.
Oh, he's pretty close. Benjamin Thomas Potter, which
Right.
also I feel like screams kicker and screams like Southern kicker. So, BT Potter, my impact player for my national champion favorite Clemson Tigers, the kicker.
Yeah, I will say that the good thing about whenever we discuss Clemson football is that we have Clemson experts. Josh, you might want to mute yourself there, bud. Oh, there we go. Yeah. This is all new to us. We have Clemson expert Andrew Coster, who went to Clemson, has seen his fair share of games. So, again, he says right here, this will be the best front seven Clemson will have since the 2018 team. So, it's a pretty hot take right there. They're best in, what, 4? I guess, yeah, 4 seasons. So, that's saying a lot. The one thing that Clemson has on their side this season is, aside from having probably the toughest non-conference game we've seen in a very, very, very long time with Georgia week 1, Clemson's remaining schedule is one of the easiest I think I've ever seen. They avoid probably the other 2 best teams in the ACC in North Carolina and Miami. So if they're able to get past Georgia week 1, they got South Carolina State, Georgia Tech, NC State, Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt, Florida State, Louisville, UConn, Wake Forest, South Carolina. Clemson, they could run the table after week 1. And even if they lose to week 1, I still think they have a strong chance to reach the national championship and at least the college football playoff yet again. But it's going to be interesting to see because, as we've seen in years past, Clemson, their depth is crazy. The recruits they get are crazy. The fact that they literally are going to have a 3-year stretch. Well, I guess technically Trevor wasn't exactly after Deshaun, right? It was who was it? He started 3 or 4 games, then they got benched.
Kelly Bryant.
Well, yeah,
Kelly
Kelly.
Bryant, that's
Kelly
right.
Bryant started a whole year, didn't he?
That's right. So
Trevor?
yeah. So he was there. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily Deshaun, then Trevor Lawrence, then DJ. Kelly Bryant is sandwiched in between there, so you can't just have a 3-year dominant stretch. But I'm excited to see what DJ what he does this year. Lyle mentioned it earlier. Justin Ross was in the running for being arguably the best wide receiver in the entire country until he had the neck issues, whatever it was. So hopefully he's good to go this year. Again, it's going to be an interesting season for sure. They're going to win at least 11 games. Very well can go undefeated. But I'm excited to see, because it does seem weird that, Trevor Lawrence only won one national championship. It's been some time since we saw Clemson win a natty, which it's been a couple years, but in college football terms, when it's Clemson, Alabama every year, it seems like it's been some time since we saw Clemson last year. So, guys, I'm just going to throw it to you. What is your prediction on Clemson's record going into the college football playoffs? Do you think they go in undefeated, or do you think there's a loss or maybe even 2 losses sprinkled in there?
I just don't see who they lose to. I mean, the conference is not very good. To be completely blunt, I just don't. I don't see it. North Carolina, I think, is going to be good, but they're not even on the schedule. So, who are they going to lose to if it's not Georgia? I like JT Daniels. They lost a few guys. You guys get banged up. If Georgia doesn't beat him, who will? So I see him undefeated going in the college football playoff. And then you know what? There was a time a couple years ago when we thought, oh, this could be the best Clemson team ever. And then they were like winning games by like not a lot, right? Like there were a couple games where it's like, whoa, what's going on with Clemson? Like, shouldn't they be blowing out NC State or whatever? Or like they should not be struggling for 3 quarters with Syracuse at home, And that happened a couple times, but like really, like even if you have a few of those games early on with like a bunch of guys stepping into roles, or there were guys that were injured, Justin Ross was out all last year, like whatever. They're like a little like winning games by like a touchdown at the beginning of the year. I don't care. They're going undefeated. And if they beat Georgia, They're going undefeated until the conference title game, and we'll see who they get. It should be North Carolina. And then at that point, I still think they're undefeated going into the college football playoff. The one team that needs to beat them to derail their season is not on their regular season schedule.
Yeah, I agree with you. If they beat Georgia, and that Georgia team's not going to have George Pickens, if they beat Georgia, they should go undefeated.
I mean, Andrew says it right here. Clemson's toughest ACC opponent on their schedule is either Pittsburgh or Boston College. Pittsburgh is at home for Clemson. Actually, is it? Let's see here. No, it's at Pittsburgh, so that's going to be a tough one. Boston College is at home, so yeah, Clemson, they should run the table if they're able to get past Georgia week 1. But guys, talking about Clemson, it's who can take down Clemson. Now, I mentioned it. They catch a break considering the two teams that probably stand any chance of beating them, the only two teams that are ranked in the top 25, both of which are top 15 programs at the moment. North Carolina, Miami, they don't have to play either. I guess that's also good for North Carolina and Miami that they avoid them, but who can take down Clemson? Again, this is assuming you're able to get all the way to the ACC title game and you got to play them. I mentioned those two teams, but I think we all can agree if anyone's going to do the unthinkable and beat the Tigers, or what was it, what you used to call them, Josh, the Tigers, the Tigs, or was that a different team?
I don't know. I call them
that was Wisconsin. You were saying
Scotty.
Yeah, that was Wisconsin. Who can take down the Tigers? If any team can in the ACC.
If it's going to be somebody on their schedule, I'm going to go with Boston College. I think BC's a decent team this year. Especially given the fact that I just don't think the rest of the ACC is all that good. I mean, NC State is someone that I think can beat them. They go to NC State early in the season. So I'm going to change my answer. If they're going early in the season, I'm checking my notes here. Yeah, so they're going to NC State in September. So that's one of the games that I wrote down. When else are they going to lose? I think BC is going to be a decent team. I don't think they're beating them in Death Valley. So I think the only regular season loss they can have, and let's go in conference. Let's forget about the Georgia game. In conference play, I think the only game they could potentially lose is at NC State, and it depends on how good NC State is. Because I think you're looking at the ACC. I think you've got three. It's just like the Big 12 for me. You've got three teams that are better than everybody else, right? You've got Clemson, you've got North Carolina, you've got Miami. Those are your three teams, and then you've got a team like NC State. NC State is my Oklahoma State, like I mentioned earlier. They're going to beat all the teams they should, and they're going to lose to all the teams that they should, right? So that's where I see NC State in. So, like, is Oklahoma State going to upset Oklahoma? I don't think so. Is North Carolina State going to upset Clemson? I don't see it. But if that's going to be a home game for NC State, if NC State's undefeated going into that game, I mean, they'd only be, 3-0, 4-0 maybe to start and then go into conference play. Who knows? But they could get rowdy, toss in some bad weather, and you've got a whole mess for an upset. But other than quite literally the perfect storm for North Carolina and in that Clemson game, I don't see Clemson losing to anybody in the regular season.
I certainly don't see them losing to anybody on their schedule outside of Georgia potentially. If I had to pick somebody to beat them, in the ACC title game, I think I'd pick Miami over North Carolina. I know UNC's ranked higher in the AP poll, but you look at UNC, I know they've got Sam Howell coming back, but you lose Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, Daz Newsome, De'Ami Brown, and then Chaz Surratt on the defensive side of the ball. Like, that is a haul that you have to replace. And I have a hard time believing if they couldn't beat Clemson with those guys, how are you going to beat them without them? So I would take Miami if I had to pick somebody and just guess that De'Aaron King maybe puts together a really good year, and Miami does have a few returning pieces, but that's at best. I don't think anybody gets particularly close. Miami didn't get that close last year. So if I had to pick somebody, it's Miami, but I think there's a big gap between Clemson and everybody else.
Yeah, I'm still, I think I've said this in previous shows. I think Sam Howell is going to be the best quarterback in college football this season. So, I mean, having that in North Carolina's end is definitely an advantage. But like Lyle said, just the amount of offensive firepower they lost. I mean, Michael Carter and Javonte Williams combined for 2,900 rushing yards and 30 rushing touchdowns. And now they're gone. Oh, and by the way, they also lost their top two wide receivers as well. Then, like you said as well, you're losing pieces on defense. So Yeah, I still think North Carolina, they stand a chance potentially just because having Sam Howell definitely helps them. But yeah, if it's going to be a team between those two, I would give the edge to Miami. Um, I you know North Carolina has the better quarterback in Howell, but De'Aaron King, I mean, just again 3 years ago, this was a guy that had 50 touchdowns in a season. Granted, it was for Houston in a group of 5, but having 50 touchdowns in a season is impressive regardless of where you play. If he's able to return to that in any form, last year with Miami, wasn't awful, but I don't think he put up the kind of numbers and played like Miami fans and coaches maybe expected. He's coming off an ACL injury, so again, don't know how long he's going to take to recover from that, if he's going to look like his old self early in the season. But I think if Miami's fully healthy, ready to go, again, I don't think any team in the ACC is going to be able to beat Clemson. But I think if you're talking about a team that has the better chance, I think probably Miami, but then again, just because of the Sam Howell effect, I would give the edge to him. But I don't know. I mean, Andrew says right here he thinks Boston College has the biggest chance to beat them. You look at the game last year against BC. Clemson was down for a good amount of the game. They're a good team. I mean, Boston College, they did receive votes in the AP Top 25 poll. Dracovic is there, who was a former Notre Dame quarterback who looked fairly good last year. I know Lyle, when we talked about a lot of episodes last season, kind of like underrated guys, or I think even when we did like our stars of the week, Lyle maybe had him a couple times because he had some really good games and he's a really good quarterback. So yeah, there's another team potentially that, could take down Clemson. Granted, I think this game is at home for Clemson. So maybe if this was the Boston College red bandana game, I would have this circled on my calendar as the upset potentially, but it's not. So, hey, maybe the Golden Eagles can pull off the upset. But yeah, I think Clemson runs the table in the ACC next season. But speaking of, Miami, North Carolina, we just briefly talked about them. Guys, do you think there are any teams that we're not going to say that they're going to win the ACC. We're not saying that they're going to take down Clemson. They're not going to, go to the conference championship. But are there any teams you think could surprise some people in the ACC? Maybe some teams that people are sleeping on, that voters are sleeping on, that fans are voting on, that, can potentially maybe win 8 or 9 games and be a team that has an upset or two throughout the regular season?
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what Blake you kind of just touched on, and then what Andrew had kind of said in the comments. I like Boston College as kind of a sleeper team. I kind of have them and North Carolina State in the same kind of group. Like, they're going to beat the teams that they should beat, and they're probably going to lose to the teams that they should lose. And then obviously at some point, they're in the same division. They play each other. So that's kind of where I'm at. I just think this in the Big 12, at least in terms of like team discrepancy where the programs are at, like talent wise, I just think these conferences line up against each other. So I view this conference similar to how I did last week. You got 3 at the top. You've got one that's clearly better than everybody else. You've got 2 more that are really good. And then you've got 2 teams that are kind of in the middle. They're going to beat all the teams at the bottom of the conference, and they're going to lose to those 3 teams at the top. And for me, that's North Carolina State, and that's Boston College. I like what Andrew said about Boston College being that sleeper team that could beat Clemson. Remember, a couple years ago, they played Clemson tough in Death Valley. It was like a day game or something. I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, I think they're a pretty stout team. And like Blake said, Dracovic was pretty good last year. He could be pretty good this year too. He's like a top 3, top 4 quarterback in the conference out of those, other than those top 3 teams. And then North Carolina State, I mean, they were interesting too. I think that's a pretty solid sleeper pick, to be completely honest with you. I think they've got a lot of talent. Remember, a couple years ago, they had Finley as their quarterback too. And nobody was talking about the year that they had Bradley Chubb on defense. Nobody was talking about how good that team actually was. Remember, ASU played them in a bowl game. And I think it was a close game, but ASU from the opening kickoff did not have it. North Carolina State was the better team. And I feel like nobody talks about them. And I want to say our freshman year, didn't North Carolina State beat Notre Dame in that rain game or something? Or at least it was a close game. I don't know. I think for the last couple of years, they've been kind of a sleeper team, and I think they are again this year.
Yeah, Boston College is my pick for sure, just because, and you guys have touched on it a lot already, just the fact that Jurkovic's coming back, they bring Zay Flowers back, who's their number 1 receiver. I mean, if you're going to beat Clemson, obviously you're going to have to score a lot of points and keep up with that offense. So that's a quarterback receiver duo that can certainly light it up and put up some gaudy numbers. So if I had to guess, I would take them. I think they can be a 8-4 type team, and maybe they pull off an upset type win somewhere down the stretch.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the ACC this season is you obviously got Clemson at the top. You got Miami, North Carolina, who are probably going to be top 15 teams all season. Maybe there'll be a team or two that sneaks their way into the top 25 for a moment or two. The ACC reminds me of the Pac-12 this season, where there seem like there are a lot of they're not great teams, but there are a lot of good teams that could potentially be relevant that can upset some people's schedules. We've talked about Boston College. We think that they're going to be a team that could potentially win, 8 games, maybe like 9 games, potentially sneak their way into the top 25 at some point. Florida State, there are some people in here that are talking about Florida State. Miles here says, I'm hoping Florida State is somewhat decent this year. Florida State could be good. They got McKenzie Milton as their quarterback right now. Granted, the last 5, 6, 7 years, Florida State's offensive line has been atrocious. I mean, they're getting their own quarterbacks injured, but they haven't really had a good quarterback. I guess DeAndre Francois was probably their best they've had since Jameis, and even Francois, as we've seen, wasn't all that good. So you're adding a guy when he was healthy was literally a top 6 player in college football. He was 6th in Heisman voting one year, I believe 8th in Heisman voting another. So if McKenzie Milton is able to return to his UCF kind of form, can you guys see Florida State, again, not potentially winning the ACC, but can the Seminoles do the impossible and actually finish above 500, which doesn't seem like it's historically that's insane to think about, but over the last few years, they've been awful. Can this Florida State team potentially be, a threat in the ACC to be on upset watch for some of these top tier dogs?
I don't know. I just don't see it personally. I mean, last year they beat North Carolina, and it took Howell's wide receivers dropping passes on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th down while driving down the field for Florida State to win that game. And they were a good team. They played a good game. They've got some potential, but I think they could play spoiler a couple times. I just don't think I don't see that happening yet. Give Norvell a little more time before I really hop on this bandwagon.
Yeah, maybe they can finish 7-5, and maybe McKenzie Milton does end up playing well. But to ask a guy to come back from an injury as tough and as gruesome as that one, and play a significantly tougher schedule than he played at UCF, is a big ask in 1 year. So I don't see them competing in the ACC. Although I guess I could see him finishing right at 7-5 or something like that. But I don't think it's anything crazy like 10-2.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. So before we wrap up our ACC talk, for those of you guys that are in the live chat right now, asking stuff, submitting stuff, we are going to be transitioning into a Q&A to close out the show. So if you guys have any ACC questions or just college football questions in general, hit us up in the live chat and ask us whatever kind of questions you guys have. Again, 10 or 15 minutes, we'll be answering as many as we can. But before we get to the Q&A, I just wanted to, again, promote that the ACC, that there are just some teams in here. I know some people were talking about Pittsburgh being a team. I think a short round even was saying Pitt because Pitt madness. Pittsburgh, they're one of those teams where it seems like every year they're in the ACC and they just have someone, either they beat someone and upset them or they put someone on upset watch because Pitt, they just hang around. Like short round said, they have some Pitt madness. Virginia Tech, I don't think they're going to be quite, the team they've been in years past, but they still have that home field advantage, which they can win on any given night against anyone with that kind of crowd. So Virginia Tech, they potentially can, do some damage, maybe, again, upset a few teams. And again, Louisville, that's a team to keep an eye on offensively. They have some really, really good weapons. Some people in the comments, I think there were a few Wake Forest comments. So look out for the Demon Deeks. But Virginia, just a couple of years ago, Virginia was, I think, a 10-win, maybe 11-win team. Haven't been the same since, but they're a team where they've seen some recent success. So, again, it's like the Pac-12. Not every team is going to be fantastic, but there are a lot of teams that they can win on any given night. And I think maybe not Clemson, but North Carolina, Miami, they can be on upset watch a couple of times, and it might not be Miami or North Carolina playing Clemson in the ACC title game. So, guys, before we move on to the Q&A, I'll each throw to you one random pick in the ACC title game that can't be North Carolina or Miami. I know YouTube kind of pretty much picked who you think is going to get there and potentially put up a chance against Clemson, but let's say there's madness in the ACC this season, and it's not one of those two teams that makes it. Who do you think faces Clemson in the ACC title game that no one's talking about?
So let me get this straight. You want me to pick between Virginia Tech, Pitt, Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Duke. That's who you want me to pick between. I'm taking Duke I'm taking Georgia Tech. Give me the Ramblin' Wreck to upset Clemson in the ACC title game.
Oh, can we not pick Boston College either? Like they're also like negated on this?
No, so you're talking about the other division. It has to be the other division.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, because it should be just the top two teams in the conference, but because divisions exist.
Well, they went back
years,
to that this year, I guess.
Yeah, so in most years, you got to take what?
Well, yeah, because last year was just the top two teams in the ACC, right? Because it was Notre Dame and Clemson last year.
Oh,
but
no,
I guess
I thought you meant they're back to just the top two teams that went back to divisions. But yeah, you were right. Last year they didn't do the top divisions. It was just top two teams.
Okay,
so back to divisions then.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So in most years, I think I would take Virginia. Give me the Cavs, the Fighting Bryce Perkinses. But no, I want the Ramblin' Wreck all the way. If we're talking chaos, give me chaos. And they've got cool uniforms. I said it last year. I think I picked them once or twice.
Yeah, I guess I'll pick Pitt because, like we talked about a minute ago, they can upset teams, and maybe they upset a couple teams somehow. But yeah, this is not exactly a cream of the crop type pick here. I don't have much faith in any of these teams to get there outside of Miami and North Carolina.
All right, guys, we're going to move now to our Q&A. So again, if you guys have any college football related questions, ACC related questions, feel free to ask us in the live chat. Yanni or Yanni, who will have the better college career, Bryce Young or DJ Uiagalelei? Both from the same class. They were ranked number 1 and number 2 in that class. So again, they're both coming in kind of pretty much with the exact same situation. DJ did get a few starts last year, whereas Bryce Young didn't, but the top 2 quarterback recruits from their class battling it out at probably they're going to be number 1 and number 2. This very well could be like the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields kind of thing where they were 1 and 2 in their class. I'm still upset that we didn't get that national championship, but that's fine. Who do you guys think has the better career between these two? So who's better over the course of the next 2 seasons?
So, not only, they're at Clemson and Bama and they were 1 and 2, but also they went to Mater Dei and St. John Bosco. So those are 2 teams that meet up all the time out here in Southern Section Championships. So I think Bryce Young is a little bit more dynamic. He's also a little bit smaller. DJ is built like a house, dude. He's 6'4", like 249. Like the dude is massive. I'm gonna say DJ, just because I think. Hang on, 249 seems massive. Is this right? He's 6'4", 249. I mean, that is insane, and he's 20 years old. I'm gonna say DJ. Just if he looked so good last year. The dude, like I said, is built like a house. If he is close to where Trevor Lawrence is, guy goes number 1 overall. I assume we're talking college. Yeah, he said better college career. I'm gonna take DJ, but just slightly, because I do think Bryce Young is gonna be good. Remember, he was committed to SC, but then Keaton Slovis went off when JT Daniels was hurt. So Bryce Young had to leave, and you know what? I think Bama's a good fit for him. He can fit in kind of the same way Tua was, kind of the same way that Jalen Hurts was for a while. So I think both of these guys are at good fits with their programs. But I'm going to take DJ just barely.
I remember when DJ and Bryce Young were squaring off in high school. I remember we looked it up, and it was not only sold out, but tickets were going for $200 or something like that for a high school football game, which is pretty nuts. I'm going to go with DJ for the time being, just because there's so much we don't know about Bryce Young yet. Yeah, he's an insanely high recruit, and people expect him to be in the Heisman conversation this year. When it comes down to it, he has only thrown 22 passes in his college career, so I think there's a lot to be desired there and a lot that we don't know about him yet. For the time being, I'll say DJ because we've seen more of him, but it could always change.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with DJ just because we've seen more of a sample size, but Again, Bryce Young, his high school tape is literally insane. And if he's able to do any of that at Alabama, I mean, he's the highest Alabama quarterback recruit they've ever had. And the quarterbacks that Bama's had over the last decade have been pretty good. So he has a chance to be better than any of those guys. Brady Cobberly, do you think there's any chance at all that Cincinnati or Iowa State can make the college football playoff?
Absolutely. And I think it also definitely helps that they're already kind of in the national spotlight too. Iowa State, I know a lot of people say that they're too high. I think they're right where they should be. I think they've gotten the recognition that they deserve, and I think they are the number 2 team in that conference. And I think they are comfortably in that spot. They can compete with Oklahoma, beat them last year in Ames. So, I think Iowa State can absolutely make a push. And Cincinnati, I think last year we kind of talked a bunch and said that this is the year that you clearly have 1, 2, and 3. It seems like, or at least 1 and 2 that are really good. In a crazy year in college football, there are teams that, like Ohio State, played like 5 games before the conference title game, where Bama and Clemson had played 9 or 10, and we're acting like that's normal, and we're putting them in the college football playoff when Ohio State's strength of schedule was worse than USC's, like, and any Pac-12 team. So I don't know. I think that they should have. We talked about them making a push last year. This year, they are already in that national spotlight. There is more of a reason this year for a team like Cincinnati to get in my opinion. Obviously, if they have the year that we expect them to have, I think they should not only be considered, but I think there's a chance that they could get in.
I have a hard time believing Cincinnati specifically can actually get in when it's all said and done. And it's no knock on them. It's no fault of who they are as a team. I just think we've seen at this point in a 4-team format, even though they're starting the year ranked this high, I think we've seen in a 4-team format at this point that they usually do not favor group of 5 teams, and borderline just don't let them in because as the season plays out, there's 2 one-loss teams that are in the SEC or the ACC that they think are deserving, and they decide, well, that's going to be a better game than letting some group of 5 team in. So it's hard for me to really believe that Cincinnati, when it's all said and done, will get in. And it's no knock on them. We just need to see the playoff expanded. That's all. Iowa State, absolutely. I mean, they returned so many players, specifically guys like Breece Hall, Charlie Kolar. I mean, they've got offensive weapons, and they already beat Oklahoma last year, like Josh talked about. I mean, if they do it again this year, which they can, and they win the Big 12, why wouldn't they be in the college football playoff? I mean, they control their own destiny, especially being ranked this high to start the year.
Yeah, Iowa State's probably the more likely option just because they have a chance to win the Big 12. Cincinnati, though, I think they definitely have a better chance than last year just for the sole reason they play on the road at Notre Dame and Indiana. So if they can go undefeated, win out, and they have wins on the road at Notre Dame and Indiana, unless there are like just 4 teams that are like, these are the guaranteed locked and loaded teams, I think Cincinnati stands a chance. If they lose to either Notre Dame or Indiana, I think they have no chance. It all comes down to winning those two crucial games that are on the road. So hopefully for Cincinnati's sake, well, I know Lyle's not hoping for Cincinnati's sake, but from a college football fan's sake, it'd be cool to see Cincinnati get into the college football playoff. But if not, well, in 2025, a group of 5 team will finally have their chance. Guys, we got fun hypotheticals here, which is my absolute favorite. This comes from Cole Converse. We got a lot here, so bear with me. What is the most likely option in 2021? A team not from Oklahoma or Texas wins the Big 12. Coastal champ wins the ACC. A Western champ wins the Big 10. A Pac-12 team gets into the playoff. Or a non-Alabama SEC West winner. So essentially a lot of these having to do with divisions, some of these doing with geography. This one is going to take, luckily, since I get to read these questions, I get to go last. So Josh or Lyle, I'll throw it to you with your best guess for one of these 5 options. All 5 of these are tough. I mean, you can make a case for all 5 of these, but you guys got to pick only one.
It's funny because we usually get these questions, and these questions are what's most likely in 2020, and then instead of a team not from Oklahoma or Texas wins the Big 12, it would be like a team not from Oklahoma, Texas, or Iowa wins the Big 12, and you're like, well, you got to like try to figure something out, or like what's more likely, like Chattanooga beats Alabama, and you're like, oh, okay, but this is tough. I like the first one. A team not from Oklahoma or Texas, because right there, that's Iowa State, and I think Iowa State and Oklahoma are that's my conference title game already. We talked about that last week. A coastal champ wins the ACC. I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to talk through this out loud because I don't think I have an answer yet. That's fine. I'm going to skip over that one and say not that one just because I like Clemson in the ACC outright. Western champ wins the Big Ten, iffy. Pac-12 team gets into the playoff. For me, I think ASU is going to be really good, but I'd rule out them. For me, it comes down to USC or Oregon. So I do think that is likely. I mean, likely. I think it could happen, and then non-Alabama in the SEC West, I just don't see that happening. So by process of elimination, I'm going with the first one. I like the non-Oklahoma or Texas to win the Big 12 because I like Iowa State.
Yeah, same. I think that was my answer right off the bat is Iowa State winning the Big 12. If you want some other options in there, I mean, I guess Texas A&M, who's ranked 6th, right, to start the year, who's ranked high to begin the season in the AP poll. Yeah, they're ranked 6th to start the season. I mean, I guess anything can happen, but I believe it when I see it in terms of beating Alabama. So I have a hard time believing that one. If B and C, I'm pretty much going to cross off. And like Josh said, Pac-12 getting into the playoff, there's a shot. I think that's the second most likely scenario, and it would probably have to be USC or Oregon. But, yeah, I think most likely of all of these, it's going to be Iowa State winning the Big 12.
I'm going to go with D. Sparky's going to be in the playoff this year, boys. You heard it here first. All right, guys. Ray Moore wants to know, do the Akron Zips win more than 2 games this?
Google's Akron Zips schedule.
I think we've done this before. They can do it again.
Okay. All right, so here's what we've got. They'll win week 1 at Auburn, Temple, Bryant, and be quite honest with you, I only see them winning 2 games, and it's their opener on September 4th at Auburn, and it's September 25th at Ohio State. Those are the only 2 games they win.
I thought you were serious for a second when you said they were going to beat Auburn, just because, like, I don't know, they beat Bo Nix, I guess. But then when you said Ohio State, I was like, okay, now I know you're kidding. Yeah, I'll say they win 3 games.
I'm going to go with none. Josh, you said they're playing Bryant?
Yeah, so Bryant, I'm actually familiar with Bryant as an athletic program. They can't be Bryant football. They cannot be FBS, right? They're not FBS.
Oh, no, they're not FBS.
What are they even in? What are they? They're Division 1. They're in the Northeast Conference. That's got to be FCS, right? That's D1.
I'm not familiar with my FCS teams, but I think they might.
It's a small D1 school. Like, I know they've got Division 1, like baseball and basketball and all that. Like, I knew people that played at Bryant, but man, Bryant football, I honestly did not know they had a football team.
So, yeah, I think Akron might be an upset watch for that game. Lyle, as we do every week, we have a Notre Dame question tailored just for you. And this comes from Notre Dame fan. And they want to know, if Notre Dame were to lose any game this season, what game would they want the game to be that they lose in order to make the college football playoff? So Notre Dame can only lose 1 game this season. Which one is their best bet in order to still reach the playoff? As I'll let you get their schedule up so you can go through and share with us some thoughts on that.
I was just going to say, I want to make sure I don't miss any. The one that immediately pops into my head is probably Cincinnati, just because, USC. I mean, that's going to be a big game all around. I mean, it could be a program-defining win for Cincinnati. It could be a season-defining win for Notre Dame. If they had to lose one, I would say Cincinnati right now, just because they're the highest ranked team. And if Cincinnati ends up having a really good year, that could help their strength of schedule a lot. Other than that, yeah, I would say either USC or North Carolina, and they have those games back to back, which will be 2 tough games. So if there had to be a silver medalist after Cincinnati on their schedule, I would say the Trojans or the Tar Heels.
I gotta tell you, Lyle, that's a pretty brutal October.
Oh, they have a tough schedule this year. They have a really tough schedule.
I think their first 4 games and their last 4 games are pretty. I mean, so they go to Wisconsin, right? But their first couple of games, Florida State, Toledo, Purdue, like okay,
well,
But
Wisconsin's iffy because it's at Soldier Field, so it'll probably be more Notre Dame fans.
It'll be more Notre Dame fans for sure. But the month of October, man, Cincinnati, Virginia Tech is a team that I don't think any of us are super high on, but I think we'll get to them in a second because we got a super chat about that. Like Virginia Tech, whatever. But USC and North Carolina back to back, that's brutal. And then the Navy game is right after that. And I feel like Navy plays them tough. So does Stanford. I don't think Stanford's going to be very good at all. But to end the year at Stanford, that's not great either. Side note, it is garbage that the COVID season takes away the Notre Dame USC game. So Notre Dame can just host USC in back-to-back seasons, essentially.
I know.
Where's the USC game? You could have come out. We could have gone.
That's true. I know that probably should have been flipped where they go out to California this year. I don't know why that happened. But yeah, the fact that their easiest game in a sense is in Blacksburg, which we know what their home crowd can do for them. Like, yeah, that is a really tough October.
So, I've always said this. It's best to lose as early as possible because if you lose a game late in the final few weeks, that screws you. So if you can get your loss out of the way early October, I think you'll be just fine. But yeah, Josh, like you said, we got a super chat that comes in from our man Connor, who just hopped in right when we were, ending our Virginia Tech discussion, and he says, "Give me Coastal Madness, a 7-way tie at 4-4 in the division." At that point, if that were to happen, I don't even know what the protocol on that is, how that would be determined. But
who?
I guess, but what if that's all even out somehow? I don't know. Who knows? But I want Coastal Madness, like Connor suggests. He says, also thoughts on Virginia Tech. Their AD got extended, so I think Fuente gets another year. We know how our man Connor feels about Virginia Tech's head coach after the season, unless Virginia Tech goes 6-6 or under 500. Virginia Tech is that kind of team where I would not be surprised if they go 8-4. Just because, like I said earlier, like Josh just mentioned, their home field advantage is one of the best in all of college football. So regardless of how good they are, they can win essentially any game at home. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Hokies finish the season like 8-4. I wouldn't be shocked if they also finish the season 4-8. So yeah, they'll upset someone at home this season, I'm sure. I think they play North Carolina week 1, if I'm not mistaken. So that already could be upset watch for the Tar Heels. But yeah, Connor, I have no clue what to make of the Hokies this season. I think it's a coin flip. I'll go heads or tails. Heads, they'll be great. Tails, they'll suck. And I'll go with that as my option for the season because they're one of the more a lot of teams in the ACC. I'm just like, okay, I know they'll be decent or I'll know they'll be bad. Virginia Tech, I just have no idea.
I'm leaning towards 7-5. They were 9-3. I'd be surprised. I think they're 8-4. Hang on, let me pull up their schedule real quick. I believe, they get, I think they get BC and North Carolina State, if I'm right here. They've got a riveting match against Richmond, and yeah, they play North Carolina week 1. They don't get New Mexico State. They don't play NC State. They do go to Boston College. That's a toss-up for me. I think that's an interesting game. I just don't think they're at the same level as North Carolina or Miami. But again, they could kind of have that similar, they could be a similar team to Boston College, where I think they could beat all the teams beneath them and lose to all the teams above them. Give or take a game here or there. If they beat Boston College, it's a team that would not shock me if they went 8-4. I also would not be shocked if they were 6-6 and maybe Fuente got fired. For me personally, I'm splitting the difference here. I'm going 7-5, and he probably gets another year.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess they go 6-6. I think that the teams that are ranked ahead of them end up taking care of business against them. I don't know. It's tough to say if we'll get another year or not. Connor believes if they go 6-6, he'll get fired, and that's right about where I think they'll be. So yeah, I guess we'll have to see. I'll take Connor's word that if they go 6-6, they'll probably look for a new head coach.
I was just replying to our executive producer Brady, who was asking how the show went, and I was letting him know how it's been going. But yeah, no, Virginia Tech, it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know, but Connor, drop your prediction in the chat as to what you think their record's going to be while we wait for our question from Short Round to wrap up the show as we do every week. A few things more here. Ray Moore said, yeah, the Bryant Bulldogs are from Rhode Island. So in case all of you guys were wondering where the Bryant Bulldogs were from, they're from Rhode Island.
I'm curious to see how big their campus is. Bryant University campus size. In acres, it is 428 acres. As opposed to, let's go with Indiana University campus size, which is around the middle of the pack in the Big Ten, and that's 1,940 acres. So small campus out at Bryant in Rhode Island. It can't be too big, though, because then it would take up the whole state.
Also true, also true. All right, guys, we got time for one more question, which comes from Short Round. Would you rather control your wealth or your health?
Short Round coming in. Not as crazy as I was expecting, but I'm gonna say I'd rather control. I mean, if you think about it, you're kind of in control of both, aren't you? To an extent. I would say health, just because health scares are, for lack of a better word, scary. Like those can kind of come up on you and they're unpredictable. Your wealth, work hard. Hopefully it pays off, because, you can eat healthy and do whatever you want. But like sometimes even taking care of yourself isn't going to work out 100% of the time. Not to be bleak, but wow. But yeah, I would say health. If I could control health, I think that'd be ideal. And then just work hard elsewhere, make that money.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to control your health. I mean, if you can control your health, you probably have a better chance to control your wealth. But if you can only control your wealth, it's probably going to be, and you have no control over your health, that's probably going to shorten your lifespan. I know I'm rhyming left and right here, but yeah, I would say health.
I'll go with that one as well, just because Cole Converse has the perfect answer. Can't take wealth with you when you die.
To be fair, you cannot take health with you if you are dead, though.
That is also true. Hey, Captain Rob's in the chat, and he said go with health always.
Rob, so where have you been? Where have you been, man? You used to be so here with the Twitter questions, I feel like.
Screw it, I'm controlling my will. Live hard today, regret tomorrow. And guys, Connor says 7-5 is my glass half full in regards to Virginia Tech. 9-3 is wishful thinking. 5-7 is glass half empty. At least we have a great 2022 recruiting class. Yeah, I think Virginia Tech's like top 15, I want to say, in regards to recruiting classes. I was looking at one the other day, I think on 24/7. Maybe I'm wrong, but I want to say they were top 15. And Captain Rob, he replies to Josh with this. Not an answer to Josh's question, just a laughing emoji. So that's a perfect thing to end our show on. So, guys, that was our full AP Top 25 poll reaction, our ACC preview. I believe next week's show is going to be on potentially next Thursday, because I'll be down in Slam Diego rooting for my show Dodgers against the Pods, who are close to being 10 games back in the division, which is fantastic to see. It's going to be a fun trip in San Diego next week, which of course in German means a whale. So guys, if you enjoyed this show, next week I believe we'll be talking about the SEC. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for more college football content as the season approaches. Like I said, we're about a week and a half away from week 0, 2.5 weeks away from the actual season beginning. Guys, any parting words before we head out for the week?
I hate Blake.
Sure.
No, we all hate Blake.
no. I'll say Pitt to the Natty or Boston College.
Well, Josh, joke's on you. No pasta for you. So.
Oh, great. Looks like I'm sleeping on the couch.
Well, that was happening anyway. For Josh Schaefer, Lyle Goldstein, this has been Blake Harris and Josh Schaefer from the Chateau, as he just gives everyone a nice look at how my apartment's looking, which is fantastic. It's a cozy looking couch, I must say. As I'm right over there, we are getting really trippy right now. Yeah, Josh, show everyone my great bobblehead collection I got there. Look at that great collection. You love to see it. So, yeah, for Lyle Goldstein, Josh Schaefer, this has been Blake Harris and Josh Schaefer from the Chateau in beautiful Monrovia, California. Thank you guys for watching. We're going to see you guys right back again next week. And Short Round wraps it up saying, sure, Lyle 2024. That is the perfect slogan for that. So we'll see you guys next week.